You are listening to the EnormoCast.
One would think that a dirtbag like Alex Honnold would sit back and let that sweet, sweet free solo money wash over him, like the sweat washed over your armpits watching him paddle up the free blast sans rope. Didn't look exactly solid, did it? But he ain't partying with DiCaprio quite yet. Instead, he's doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the Honnold Foundation, his nonprofit dedicated to creating equity through solar projects around the globe. And now Black Diamond is giving you a swank opportunity to get on board with the Honnold signature chalk bag and solution harness. What's the chalk bag like? Well, I've got one. It holds chalk. Sits there for when you're sweaty. No dumb pockets or zippers or anything. And the solution harness, well, Alex Honnold doesn't always climb in a harness, but when he does, it's a solution. But most importantly, the Honnold Foundation gets a kickback from BD every time you buy a Honnold signature product. So check them out at blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop. And if you don't want commerce getting in the way of your giving, donate directly at honnoldfoundation.com and keep that ratty old harness that scares your partners. Hey folks, have you fiends seen the Don Waller free solo yet? Well, spoiler alert, the one thing all the principal climbers in those amazing films have in common besides the bedhead and spectacular abs are TC pros from Sportiva. That's right, those fellas trusted their dreams to the face and crack shoe designed by Caldwell himself to tackle the big stone all day, every day. And Tommy wants your dreams to come true too. So if you want to stick to rock like your elbows stick to the table at Golden Corral, and you want your toes to luxuriate inside cracks like it's their home.
That's your home! Are you too good for your home?
Then check out the TC Pros and all of Sportiva's great shoes at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. And yeah, TC stands for Tommy Caldwell. Am I the only one that took a while to figure that out?
We gotta get Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Normo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
big
big
house.
place
Sold it
outside
out.
of town. That's a big
Nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000 seats.
We
really should.
The hell are you doing?
I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. No, later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the EnormoCast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the EnormoCast. This is your host, Chris Kalous, and this is the first ever BandWagon episode of the EnormoCast. Why is it called the BandWagon episode? Well, because we're still riding on that bandwagon that's called Free Solo. And this is actually a rebroadcast of Alex Honnold's interview from July 2017, just a few weeks after he soloed the freerider on El Capitan. And of course, the reason I'm doing that is because the movie Free Solo just won a goddamn Oscar. So I thought to myself, well, I really should repackage that thing, throw some new advertising on it, and, bada bing, bada boom, I got an episode. Which then I kind of backtracked on because I'm like, that's something big media would do. But then I went and listened to the interview, and actually it was really fun to listen to it after I'd seen Free Solo and after all this stuff has happened. Among other things, we actually kind of downplay what it's going to mean to the bigger world that he free soloed El Capitan. At that point, he had been on Jimmy Kimmel, and we kind of thought that was going to be it. That was going to be like this high point of the fame that he received from free soloing El Capitan, at least in the mainstream media. But oh, how wrong we were. So that's kind of fun to hear. But just hearing about it now that you've seen it, that it's such a big deal, hearing kind of this first person account right after it happened is actually pretty fun. So that's what the BandWagon episode of the EnormoCast is today. If you've already heard this and don't care to hear it again, then just shut her down because there'll be a new proper EnormoCast episode up in a few days. And if you've arrived here not necessarily a fan of the Enormocast, but just someone who's fiending on Google and looking for Alex Honnold stuff, well, welcome aboard. If you're not much of a climber, we're going to go deep in the weeds here. But since you probably watched Free Solo, you'll probably get some of it or most of it. And there's actually, for everybody, might be interesting to go way back to 2013 in Alex's first episode. I think it's in the 40s somewhere, when he came on the show for the first time. And it's kind of wild to hear that too, in terms of the evolution of who he's become, at least as a public person in the last few years, is quite a change. All right, that's it. Let's get this bandwagon rolling. Here's an interview with Alex Honnold from July 2017, not long after he had free soloed Freerider on El Capitan.
So you've been listening to Enormocast while soloing easy climbs?
Yeah, well, I listened to Conrad's thing about like mortality and stuff. You know, your chat with Conrad that was like pretty heavy. I listened to that while I was like soloing some 5.6 in my tennies, and I was like, this is like kind of a weird time for it.
Go back to, I don't know. Go back to a James Lucas one, although you probably don't listen to those ones.
Well, those are even worse than I'm listening while soloing. I'm like, and then I took a 90-footer, broke every bone in my body. I'm like, oh, I should go home now.
Yeah, I forgot that's what that's what the first James Lucas one was all about, was the Red Point free solo.
Yeah, he's still the best Red Point free soloist in the world.
Yeah, and remember, we're like, and maybe this is one of the reasons you were actually psyched to do it, is we're a total climbing podcast. So
yeah, totally.
We can get into it, and actually I kind of want to get into
Mostly
it.
I'd heard, like Andrew Bishrat's been on like 4 times, James has been on 4 times. I was like, man, I've only been on once. I was like, I gotta make this happen.
Dude. Thanks. You're still number 1 though.
Oh yeah?
Because James, well, in a way.
You mean in downloads or what?
Yeah. James got in touch with me and he's like, who's the highest downloads? And so I hadn't looked in actually years. And so I looked just straight for a single episode. Most downloads. You were still ahead of Tommy by...
Ooh, tiny hair.
Yeah, literally, and this was like last week, it was literally like by 100 and some episodes out of like 40-some thousand.
Whoa.
But I'll have to, I do have to kind of...
multiple episodes too, right?
No, but this was for a single episode. And actually, Tommy's only been on once.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll have to, tell you, Tommy's is much newer, so
yeah,
you've been out there great. Totally. Yeah, so... you're right there with TC, with the man, which is, fitting.
So I bet if I do a new one, it'll do well, Because having been out there for a long time is kind of good and bad,
Yeah.
Because it means like you get the trickle, but you don't get that like big bump at the beginning.
Yeah, I think we're pretty safe to say that. You'll be on top.
You're going to distribute this to the Kimmel mailing list.
Yeah. Is there such a thing?
I'm sure there must be. I'm sure like Jimmy Kimmel Live has all kinds of like crazy,
Yeah, so tell me about that. Well, you flew out there for a day and filmed the...
No, I flew out to California for 3 days. I actually flew out to California for a North Face event, and then I did like a outrageous signing at the Planet Granite in Presidio. It was like maybe the most next level event I've done so far. It was maybe because it's the first like event I've done since El Cap. But I didn't even give a talk or anything. I was just signing stuff. I just showed up and like signed posters and books. And they'd contacted an independent bookseller out there to like sell books for the event. He said that I sold more books of that like random thing than I did for my actual book tour.
Really?
Because he was the same guy that had done it for my book tour. And I was like, geez, it felt like really next level. I was signing stuff for like 2.5 hours, like as fast as I could.
Right on.
It like my hand like hurt afterward. I have like this kind of faint, like honestly, I have this like hand injury, like this.
And then his career was over.
Yeah, no, totally. I like a bit over a year ago, I like pulled a ligament in my hand and like separating my fingers kind of hurts in a weird way. It's like basically fine and everything about it, but after like signing as fast as I can for like, it was basically 4 hours that day because I did a couple hours at the North Face office too. And by the end I was like, oh my God, I have like hand pain. It's like, this is kind of crazy.
So how does something like the Kimmel thing happen? Are you running an agent these days? There's North Face dealing? Yeah,
I've had an agent for several years now, like many years.
Right.
But yeah, so the late night TV stuff, I mean, I don't know. So the vice president of marketing at North Face, basically like the big boss, is like friends with one of the producers at Jimmy Kimmel Live. So there's like a bit of a connection there. And so they'd been like playing phone tag with my agent for a long time, Jimmy Kimmel had. Oh. And so like, cause post El Cap, you know, they like reached out. It's like, oh, that's cool. But then I went to Alaska for a couple weeks and then just whatever, like phone tagging. And obviously I'm like way bottom of the barrel compared to like, you know, Ben Affleck going on or something. And so, I don't know, they just like randomly had a hole to fill probably. And, you know, like probably some real celebrity backed out and they're like, oh, we need something. And then they're like, oh, there's this weird dude. But
yeah, I mean, that was like the joke. What it was, you know, crazy person, solo climber or something.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That. So, I mean, how you obviously have to have a sense of humor about all that stuff. And you get some of that from the climbing side as well.
Yeah, I mean, everybody calls me a crazy person. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, so it's like, is it just rolling off your back?
Oh, yeah, I do not care at all.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same way I think of like a race car driver is like, oh, what a crazy dude.
Sure.
It's like, maybe not race car, but, you know, any sport or like weird activity that you know nothing about, you just assume like, oh, well, that's pretty fringe, you know? Like, that's crazy. But it's just because you don't know anything about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we the climbers know something about it, and a lot of them are still like, whoa. I mean, in that way, I think there's a relatability that all climbers have to the possibility of falling and to fear and these sorts of things. So, but what was your treatment like on that? I mean, who else was on the show?
Actually, so the interesting thing, my treatment on the show was kind of awesome. Mostly because all the staff, like everybody involved with the show, was all super stoked. They were all like big fans, or like hadn't known much about me, but were like blown away. But I think they're also jaded from working with actors and musicians or whatever. That like to have somebody different on the show, they're like, this is so awesome.
Right.
You know? But so I felt like there was a ton of enthusiasm from the staff, which is cool actually, you know, because they're like, oh, it's really an honor to have you on. It's so great. Like, so glad you could be here. And I'm like, you know, and I'm like looking at 50 Cent, being like, holy shit, that's 50 Cent.
Right.
You know, like. But you know, they like hang out with 50 Cent all the time, so like whatever, that guy just like raps, like who cares? And I'm just like, that's so cool. I don't know, it's all just sort of different worlds.
Yeah, and I watched it the other morning because it was on YouTube. I mean, the day after, I think you filmed it, and I thought Jimmy had showed a lot of respect and you know,
as far as mainstream interviews go, he definitely like tread a nice middle ground of like, interested, respectful, like. And still comical, you know.
Yeah.
It's like...
No, his 50 Cent shot was that you guys should both neither one of you should be alive. Was probably his golden moment there. So...
You hear he introed it before he'd introduced the segment, like during one of the earlier things, he teased it with like, oh, you climbed this 3,000-foot wall. That's almost as high as Snoop Dogg is in the back room right now.
That's a good one, too.
I was like, it's pretty friggin' funny.
Yeah.
I was like, I've never heard El Cap compared to Snoop Dogg.
Yeah. That's so. Let's. I'm super stoked you're here, and I really appreciate taking time to do this. So let's get into this El Cap thing because obviously, I've been joking that with you, it kind of landed flat with you. But when you texted me to, hey, it'd be cool to do the show again, I was like, my text back to you said, hey, I don't know, have you done anything cool lately? And just obviously a play on the fact that, of course, everybody freaking knows about what you did. So El Cap, free solo, the free rider, you even on Kimmel, and I know this from all the other media, you said you've been preparing this, I mean, really specifically for a year. And I think probably, you know, in terms of your dreams of it, doing it, and in the beginning of the idea of it's been for years and years, maybe since you walked into the valley, who knows? But
definitely not when I first walked into the valley, because then you're just like, oh my god.
But so tell me a little bit about that preparation, and maybe when the idea went to like, wow, maybe I should and can do this thing, versus the kid who walked into the valley and was just like, that thing's huge. I don't know if I'll ever climb it.
The dream of it, you know, it was like the vague, the mental side of it is like over years and years of like, oh, maybe. But actually, for me, the first time I sort of like thought I might be able to actually solo El Cap was climbing the Heart Route with Brad Gobright in like the summer of 3 years ago now. Maybe it was, what's it now, 17? Maybe it was 15. I think could have been 14 actually. He and Mason had just freed the hard route. Brad and I were trying to do an easier version, like we call the lighthearted, but doing the free blast into the top of the heart, and we did that in a day. And I was just up there to support him, basically like adventure mode. I'd actually taken like a month off of climbing, and I wasn't really in climbing shape. We were climbing the free blast like in morning shade, simuling, and it was like the first time I was ever like, oh, I could kind of imagine soloing this. And a big part of it was because the conditions were so stable, like because it was like warm when we left the ground, but it was like shady, and we're like in shorts and t-shirts, just like climbing in pleasant temps on like nice slabs. Because oftentimes when you start super early on that stuff, your like fingers or toes are numb, or it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's not quite perfect. And I don't know, I was up there with him and I was like, oh, this feels pretty easy and it's like pleasant conditions, and I was like, I could kind of imagine soloing this. But it was the first time that I was actually like, could be possible. And then obviously it still took several years after that, but to actually do it. But
yeah, the free blast it's funny. Again, we've got like the perspective of, like, again, this mainstream media of this giant thing, but as climbers and as someone who's climbed the free blast several times and the free rider, like I was able to really start thinking about even individual moves, and it's always been in my head like, yeah, I know there's like hard 512 climbing up there above that, but then I go to those freaking
the
511
the free
slabs.
blast is like the gatekeeper for sure. Like the idea of getting past the free blast was always like the big initial hurdle where you're like, I don't know, the free blast is messed up, because that's like the scariest type of stuff to solo. It's like so low angle and so smooth and just like...
Right, and people haven't climbed it just to, like... The pitch I always think about is the bolt ladder, the sideways one. I know there's other hard climbing too, but like just, it's a nothing...
Yeah, there are no handholds.
Yeah. And I remember doing like just the little like pad foot switches across the little dishes.
Yeah, I put a lot of practice
with a rope on, you can clip as many bolts there as you want. Like,
but even then, it's still kind of scary because you still feel like you're going to fall at any second.
Yeah,
or you can. You know.
Yeah. So that I was when you know, people have been speculating, you know, probably to your chagrin about, oh, is Alex going to free solo El Cap? When is it going to happen? And anytime someone said that, I would like instantly project myself to those moves, and I was just like, whew.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's interesting to hear that was in your head too.
The free blast was kind of like the free blast and the crux were like the two things.
Sure.
Like the boulder problem is hard enough that it has to be taken seriously, and then the free blast is just insecure enough that it's like kind of messed up.
Yeah. But, so keep going. So you're up there and you're like, wow, this feels good. I could mentally get over the idea of free soloing these pitches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, you know, there's a whole like feature film coming out about El Cap stuff. I mean, so the whole soloing El Cap is like tied up in the film for sure. Not because of any kind of pressure or whatever, but because basically my entire process was all documented as this film project. Okay. Like from start to finish, it was all like in this film. So I mean, it's kind of been this like interesting journey where, you know, there've been like Jimmy and a crew like involved the entire time, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, basically, like I had the thought that it was possible, and I was kind of like, okay, like maybe this is a thing, and then just sort of by chance, Jimmy and his wife Chai approached me about doing a film project, and at the same time the Center guys approached me about doing a feature film project, and it kind of unfortunately had to be like choose one and sort of like make a feature film.
Right.
And so for, you know, various reasons, whatever, I wound up working with Jimmy and Chai, and then it was like, okay, we're doing this feature film project, which nobody proposing the film has said anything about El Cap or anything. They're just like, we want to do a feature on you going soloing, or even just you climbing and your lifestyle and whatever. But for me, you know, before I even talked to either of them, I was like, if I'm going to do a film, it's going to be El Cap, because that's like the only thing that's like worthy of a film. And so then, like from the very beginning, you know, I was just like up there working on El Cap stuff with like film crew and, you know, you say film crew, but in practice that meant like me and Mikey wrapping El Cap together, him with a camera, but the two of us like doing stuff. Mikey Schaefer.
Right.
Or like, you know, me and Shane Lumpy like wrapping El Cap together and like toiling on the wall and doing stuff. So I mean, even though it's like, oh, I'm up there with a movie crew, I was like, it's actually, I'm up there with my friends doing what I would normally be doing, but like with help. So in some ways it's kind of easier. I mean, in some ways it's like a big chore to have a bunch of people hanging there with cameras like watching you, but a lot of the time that makes it easier, because like wrapping El Cap by yourself is like kind of a lot of work sometimes.
Right.
You know, I mean, like just the logistics of having somebody else to help like pull the rope as fast as you can while you thread it or something, you know, it just like makes things easier when you have a partner.
Does when I just mentioned a minute ago, the speculation or the
like I said, you're sort of this figure in climbing that, I don't know, people feel like open season to just talk about your life and what you're doing. I mean, you're famous enough.
That's fair.
And maybe you don't even realize to the extent of it, but you're like a meme or a catchphrase in so many ways. I mean, for better or worse. But so you're up there doing this stuff. There's guys filming you. I'm sure there was, some agreement to be a bit tight-lipped about what all was happening.
I mean, we all signed non-disclosure agreements.
But at the same time, everybody's in the valley, and it's this stage.
Yeah. So one of my big fears forever working on El Cap was the fact that as soon as I started doing anything, people would just know.
Right.
But in some ways, the film actually kind of helped cover that a little bit, because it's like, oh, we're just up here like shooting some like promo piece, or we're like shooting something for the parks, or like, it's always kind of vague, and it's like not that unusual to be doing like work days on El Cap or whatever. So like, in some ways, it's like less suspicious for me to be up there filming some random thing than it is for me to be up there by myself, just like flogging out mini traction labs.
Right.
But then just randomly, I don't know, like it never really seemed to blow up like before. And actually, I really appreciated the whole community for that, because especially when I finally did it this spring, I'm pretty sure that anybody in the valley had like a decent sense of what was going on. But there was nothing posted. There was no like big threads on Super Topo or anything. There was no, at least as far as I know, there was no public knowledge of it.
As a guy, I don't pay attention, especially now that I have a kid, as much as I used to, but I pay attention to things like that.
And you're like deeply like in the scene too, like you would hear about that type of stuff.
Right.
But like, so in the fall, I put an attempt on soloing the Free Blast, and had to start in the dark with a headlamp and whatever. And Mason and Nick Berry were over working on their project over on the west side, and they just saw like a solo headlamp going up the Free Blast slabs, and they were like, holy shit. And like one of them posted something on Instagram or something like that, and it was up for like 45 minutes, and then Mikey Schaefer fully was like put the kibosh and like basically just called him, was like, take that down, and they like took it down. It was totally cool.
Right.
And I wound up bailing that day anyway, so it was kind of good that it wasn't like a thing. But so there were a couple things like that where like, the crew kept it pretty tight. The community all sort of like respected the process. Everybody kept it mellow, and which is good, because I don't know if I could have done it had there been like tons of people coming up all the time like asking,
Sure, yeah, and that is cool, and that was kind of the first thing I thought of too. Again, just. Okay, so the greater world didn't know, but I'm like, well, what was the buzz like in the valley?
No, but so, okay, the day I soloed it, I started up the first pitch. There was a camera guy at the bottom who's like a good friend of mine, but he'd like hiked up separately, and he was just sitting there. So I like hiked up by myself. I like put my shoes on. We didn't really chat much. I started climbing, and then he was just going to he was going to hike up to the top and then shoot the summit too. And when I was like halfway up the first pitch, these three guys hiked up. I could hear all the jangling in the forest, and I was like, oh, like I didn't really want people like at the base like watching me as I start. It's just because I was still like sort of nervous, and there's like a lot of wall above you, and it's just like a thing, like I didn't want to watch people watching, But apparently, and it turns out I knew the dudes, but I didn't know at the time. The camera guy said that they like walked up and like saw what was going on, and they're just like, oh god, it's happening. And then they just like hid in the forest and like waited. I was like,
okay, so there was some sense of
but those guys.
But again, these guys backed off.
But as it turns out, I think that was Drew Smith, and he's like shooting a bunch of photos in the valley, and they were going up to Free Core Zone or something. So they're pretty like in the know, like in the community.
Sure.
But still, you're like, it just shows that even like peripherally, just like folks in the valley community had a pretty good sense. They're like, oh no, it's begun.
So you said you did a try, or you did a short attempt. Tell me about that. Tell me about what, because this is, and you've said this before, you do back off sometimes. You do decide not to do it sometimes. And
this was one of those cases.
Yeah. So, but again, I think a lot of people will wonder, well, what is the process, or what is the thing that
so all this
sets
will be
the alarm off and tells you, no, this is not the moment.
Yeah, this will all be like in the movie, I'm sure. But in a nutshell, like in the fall, my very first climb in the valley, I was climbing the Free Blast with my girlfriend and just like fell off the Free Blast slabs, which is totally embarrassing. But took like a 20-footer and like severely sprained my ankle and was basically crippled.
Man.
Yeah, it was kind of messed up.
That must have been in your head.
But it wasn't like that in my head though, because I was like, total cruiser mode. I was skipping bolts. I had a pack on, and it was like lightly raining. Maybe I was like in a jacket, and it was like it was like overcast and really windy and cold. And I couldn't feel my fingers, and I was just like, I'm paddling a lot. And we were like in full conversation. I was like having a nice time chatting with the lady friend, and then just suddenly like whipped, And I was kind of like, really the lesson there was that I should be like paying more attention. It's just like, man, I was like getting too casual on this type of thing. And so, it didn't help my confidence, I guess.
Yeah,
but at the same time, it wasn't like, it wasn't like, oh, that's a deal breaker. It's just like, well, it just goes to show when you're not paying attention, you make stupid mistakes, But the thing about soloing is you're always paying attention.
Yeah, you better be.
Yeah. But so anyway, my first pitch in the valley, basically, I like sprained my ankle super badly. And so then for the next like month, I was pretty much crippled, didn't really do much. It was like pretty serious ankle injury. And so that was like the whole month of October, I was like crippled. And then November, I started like working on the route again and was like sort of able to like put some effort into El Cap. I wrapped in and sort of like sussed things out and felt like vaguely ready, had like kind of done a bunch of it. But the thing is, I hadn't been climbing that much because my ankle was hurt. I hadn't even been able to wear my real pair of shoes or anything. And so then basically the season was going to shut down. Because like a storm was coming in and like everything was all perfectly chalked and like good to go, and it was like about to storm, and then the weather just looked like it would be like done for the season. And so I was kind of like, well, if I'm going to do it, I have like this one shot, and there's like this whole movie crew there, and it's like this whole thing. And I was kind of like, all right, well, at least like take my shot, And there are a lot of climbs that I've done like that in the past where it's like you just take advantage of your moment. You're kind of like, well, this is the day, so if it's going to happen, it's happening today. But like from the get-go, my shoe felt way too tight because my foot was still swollen. I couldn't really feel my toes that well. And then the free blast labs, I made it up exactly to what you were talking about, the rightward traverse on that first free blast lab. And basically I like couldn't really feel my right foot right. And I was like, I don't want to trust my whole life to like this foot that I just can't, this is not right. And so then I started pulling on the bolts. And so that kind of makes so I was still soloing, but I was just like pinching the bolt hangers and stepping on the bolts. But that makes it probably like 5'10" slab climbing instead of 5'11". Like seriously, it's like not really that hard. But so I finished I finished the free blast at like 5'10" A0. And it was kind of a bummer because had I had like a harness and a small rack, I probably would have just carried on up the Salate and like set the speed record on the Salate. Because I was raging and I felt great, but I just wasn't like sending. But so I borrowed a sling and a beaner off of a camera guy and wound up just like wrapping the heart lines, which I gotta say, wrapping the heart lines with only a double link sling and one carabiner is like kind of no joke.
Right.
Like, using a muncher to like wrap 1,000 feet with like a double link sling, like diaper harness is like pretty bad. But anyway, so then I was back at the ground at like 7:30 in the morning, and I just like cheated my way up the free blast, and I was like all like warmed up and amped, like ready to do something, but just not my project, like not El Cap. And I wound up going over and doing Astroman in the rostrum that afternoon, which like felt like a consolation thing for me. The thing is, it was such a junk show with all the media, and it was like kind of weird with like people filming, and I was just like, you lose the spontaneity of like, I'm just going to go do what I want. And so like after bailing on the free blast, I just like took off by myself and biked over to Astroman. I hadn't climbed it in years, so I basically like re-onset soloed Astroman, which was like kind of engaging. It'd been a long time.
Really? Yeah. You felt engaged on the Astroman. Like, that's nice to know.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool. But so I did the Astroman, and then actually like for the film stuff, we had to go shoot some stuff on the rostrum. Because I'd sold the Excellent Adventure earlier in the season. I don't know if you ever heard about that, but
no, I didn't actually.
But so like we'd filmed on the Excellent Adventure, but they needed like a bit more rostrum stuff. But so then in the evening, I like went over there and sold the whole rostrum again too. And I was like, oh, it's a pretty legit day doing, the free blast, Astroman, and the rostrum in a day.
Yeah, right.
Like it's funny because no
one notices like.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well,
most people, it's like a lifetime. It would be like a lifetime career thing, or it would have got you on Jimmy Kimmel like 25 years ago.
Yeah. Well, doing Astroman in the rostrum like 10 years ago is what got me sponsored and like what got me like into the whole pro climbing world.
Oh yeah.
And then now to repeat it 10 years later is like a casual afternoon, like just something to make me feel better about myself. I was like, oh, it's I felt good. Anyway, but that was kind of the end of my fall season.
You just mentioned that you had a little bit of, or you felt like, okay, this is the day it has to happen now.
Well, then the next day it rained. Everything gets washed off. Then it's like too much effort to retake everything.
So did it feel like maybe like a pressure release to like, okay, we're going to wait till next season now? Or were you disappointed that I
still sort of throughout the fall kind of hovered with like, well, keep looking at the weather and sort of see, like maybe. Actually, randomly, that's when Adam Anders sent the Dawn Wall.
Okay.
And so he had to like film on the Dawn Wall a few more days, but he was thinking about doing an on-site effort on the Salothay, and I told him I'd support him so we could like simul and he could like maximize his chance of like on-siting the Salothay. Because I was like, that would be a freaking experience to support Adam Otter up the Salothay. But then it kind of was the same thing where the weather didn't work out and he had too much on the Dawn Wall. But so I'd left the valley, but I was going to come back to support him, and I was kind of like, well, if I climb the whole Salothay with him, then I'll sort of see.
Right, it'll be another look to see how the conditions and stuff are.
But it just never played out. It was like it started snowing and stuff.
You have a good idea how long it would probably take you to, I mean, because you climbed it with
Yeah, well, so actually a week or two before, Tommy and I had simuled the Freerider in 5.5 hours. But I led the whole thing. It was amazing. Like, Tommy was just like support mode. I mean, he freed, basically the whole route too. He skipped the down climbs. He just repelled the down climbs because like, who cares? But so we simuled the Freerider in 5.5 hours in 3 blocks. I did like 3 10-pitch blocks and like just went to the top. It was so amazing. I mean, the mountain's never even been climbed that way. It just like huge long blocks, super fun. But so I kind of thought that that if I was soloing it, I'd go slightly faster than that. So I kind of thought like 4.5 or 5 hours.
Right. Well, the reason I asked that is it's interesting to realize that when you're talking about conditions and you're looking for a window to do it, and I mean, you're really working with a pretty small amount of time that you need. Do you know what I mean?
It's not that though. It's like you need it to have been dry for several days before. You need it to be chalky, so preferably other people have climbed it before, or it has your tick marks or something. But like, one big storm like pressure washes the slabs. And like, honestly, I have the Free Blast slabs still totally memorized, but like if it's just been pressure washed, I'm up there and I can't even see the edges, like it's really small holes and you're just like, God, it's, like really adds something.
Well, yeah, I believe that because I mean, even climbing something that you've worked on in the shade as a sport climb, and then you try it in the sun, it's like, whoa, where did everything go?
Yeah, totally.
For sure, I've experienced that, 100%. Okay, well, let me just finish this. We're having a good time and going all over the place, but let me finish then the final sort of end of the process. I had Honnold on a little while ago.
Nice.
And
where did you talk to him?
He was in Glenwood, actually. He was in Rifle like 2 months ago and came over to visit Cody Roth and he climbed a new route in the Black with Mook Mayer and did a few days in Rifle, and I happened to run into him. And he mentioned, because he's sort of like, one of your counterparts in the free soloing world in terms of big solos, and mentioned like the moment, or mentioned this idea of when you do wake up and this is the day, this is the moment, whether it's external, the conditions are perfect, and then it's also in his mind like you have to feel this time. Is that something that you also sort of prescribe to? Because a little bit of what you said was like, no, I can make these things work sometimes, and he was a little bit more at least in the way of talking,
almost like spiritual.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even go that. Yeah, spiritual is a way of looking at it.
That's like the Dean Potter way of looking at it. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, so where do you fall on that, and how did you end up the week of when the rest of the climbing world woke up the next day? And I'll tell you this too. Like, I was in Rifle that weekend after you did it the next day or whatever, when the internet had lit up and everybody knew, but everybody in Rifle, because there's no phone service, nobody knew.
Yeah.
And so several times that day, myself actually and Steve, who you just met, were just chatting about like, whoa, he did it. And people were like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, you guys don't know, do you? Like, and so it's kind of funny, and everybody's like, what? So again, like, what's the moment, or what's that week look like, or how did you end up saying like, this is another try?
The moment, I don't know, it is interesting. So I've done a bunch of hard solos where I'm just like, today's the day, and you just like go up and do it. And the kind of the impromptu or like spur of the moment or just whatever, capitalizing on that feeling. But because this was all like a film project, it was like a lot less spontaneous like that, because, there are people up there filming and I've been working with them for a year. It's like, I don't want to hose them at the very last second. But I mean, I had kept it in my mind that like, if it was the difference between sending or not sending, then I would have just like left everybody behind and just gone and done it myself. But the best case scenario was to be able to send it like with the whole crew and like keep it as a team effort, and And so, I mean, I was trying to not be super like spontaneous, whatever. But then at the same time, like they sort of respected my process too, and they knew that I needed slightly more space to just sort of like decide on my own. And so in the fall, I had been like more enmeshed in the whole crew. In the spring, when I actually sent, I didn't even know who was in the valley exactly. I didn't know who was there on the crew, and basically, like, there was one filmmaker staying down in the place where I was, and then Jimmy was kind of there in his van, and so it was like just the two of them hanging out, and then me like climbing. And I didn't even know that there was like the sound guy and like all these other folks like, you know, there. But and so I don't know. I mean, the day before I was gonna do it, I kind of told them like, oh, you know, like maybe. And then the day before they were hanging out talking about how they might go climb the East Buttress the next day, and I was sort of like, you know, like maybe you should like get ready just in case. Like I'm thinking about maybe climbing. And they were like, you know, I mean, we're pretty stoked to do the East Butt, but like if you think you're gonna climb, like that's fine. Like we'll go up there. And like what I didn't know is like in the background there was already like a whole crew on the wall. There were people camped on top. There were like ropes all over. Like people are doing stuff. You know, there's like a movie being made, and but they kept it all like, you know, like chill. So I'm just like sitting there thinking there's nothing going on. There's no pressure. There's like nothing weird. And I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, you know, we should probably like go up there tomorrow. And they're like, all right, whatever, you know, if you think so. And then I just like went up there the next day.
Someone presses the silent alarm under the table.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like at the bank. Okay,
yeah,
boys.
Like I didn't know like Chai was like frantically flying back in from New York that night. She showed up at like midnight. She was like watching in the meadow like the next day.
Okay.
So like when I came down the East Ledges, there were like all these other people that you're like, oh, hey, like who knew that you were in town? You know, like when did you show up? You know, it's like, but it kept it like super relaxed for me, which is kind of how it had to be, because it's like, if there's like all this pressure and you know all these people are like waiting and watching you, then it's sort of a weird, I don't know, there's like too much pressure.
Right.
But I don't know.
Well, let me ask you that, because I wanted to ask you that about the filming. You know, there's like the old school, and actually it's kind of pretty much Croft has built this idea and has repeated it. I think probably even since. You know, this no film, like climb for yourself, this whole thing.
No, but that's not true, because Peter has done so much filming too.
I know.
I mean,
but it's
like he had
like
a couple
the
bad
mythology, I
experiences,
guess, in a way. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, Peter had some bad experiences filming when he was younger, like on some hard solos and stuff, and then like kind of chose not to film much. But then, I mean, you know, he is a sponsored climber. Like he goes out and he makes films for like the North Face and whoever else. Like he's out there shooting all the time.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, the whole mythology of like, I mean, even John Backer was like shooting all kinds of TV stuff, and like Lynn Hill in the 80s was like rappelling into game shows and stuff, you know?
Yeah, I get it. That's actually what I wanted.
That's kind of been like, the sport has always had that type of stuff going on. It's just like, it's just part of the process, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, so for me in the past, I'd always like done my climbs by myself and then gone back and filmed on them. But like in some ways that's even more disingenuous, because it's like, then you're watching this film of like, he's soloing this route, but you're like, actually he's soloing the easy pitches on this route like 1 year after the fact. You know what I mean? It's like kind of like, you know, you think you're watching something amazing, but really you're watching like a pale version of the real event. And so, I mean, that was kind of the thing with making this film with Jimmy and Chai, is like they were very strict about, you know, documentary filmmaking process, and they were like, we're actually up there shooting the real thing, which was like much more challenging to actually like do the real thing. But also like obviously much more real, you know?
Right. Now you're super casual about all this stuff when you talk about it. And, you know, I think a lot of it's probably super just straight up the way you are. But for those of us listening, you know, every once in a while, like, yeah, but, you know, when you're being chilled, and truly, obviously they were feeling this idea that, well, we can't be too obtrusive to what he's doing. We have to be careful. We have to, you know, because they were like trying to like keep you in this bubble away from everything. So they're obviously have some understanding of it.
Yeah, I think they learned from the fall, because the fall was like way too crazy, and it was like really stressful for me, and it was like too much. And then in the spring, we all sort of like learned from it, and like it all.
So that, I guess that you just answered my question, because I wanted to know, like, truly, does it have at least a little bit of an effect on you? And
yeah, in the fall, I mean, there was all kinds of stress, because like my girlfriend was living in my van with me, but like they didn't really want to film with my girlfriend very much, because like it's a movie about me, and they were trying to like kick her out all the time. And it was like honestly, it was like kind of a weird dynamic. So then she's stressed because she feels like she's like not wanted, and that like everybody wants her to leave. But like I want her to hang out, because we're like living in the van together, you know? I was like, we're like on the road, you know? And so, you know, there's like all this weird interpersonal stress stuff going on, where you're just like, man. And even just the logistics of it, when they're like 10 people on the crew, and I'm sort of like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this, And if you guys want to film it, then like these 4 people should come with me. Like you should stash a car there. This person should wrap in. Like that person should do whatever. Like, oh, we need to eat. Like, well, maybe you should go to the store while other people.
Right.
You know, you're like, fuck. It's a lot of things to think about. You know.
Yeah, the kid who
like,
used to live in his van all by himself.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Like, right.
I'm used to just like waking up and being like, I need groceries. I'll just bike to the store and grab what I need, and then go climb and do whatever. You know. Yeah, having to have that degree of planning, like, just, you know, take some of the joy out of life.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. And so
but honestly, the real challenge with the fall was the fact that I'd hurt my ankle, and I just, like, couldn't climb the way I wanted to. I couldn't boulder, so I couldn't really, like, do any kind of, like, extra finger strengthy type stuff. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't do, like, volume because my foot was hurting, so I just couldn't, like, climb the way I wanted. And yet there are, like, 15 people that are making a movie about how I'm supposed to be rad, and I was like, I'm so unrad, you know, like, I can't do anything. Mm-hmm. I was like, it was just challenging, you know.
They can make you look rad anyway, though.
Yeah, they just CGI that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So a couple more questions up on the wall there. So yeah, we talked about free blast, and again, that was my first like whoa red light. But then getting up into that crux climbing, how many times do you think you like went up there? How many times do you think you did the crux pitch?
I mean, I've probably done the crux boulder problem like 30 times or more or something. Mm-hmm. I had one day where I rapped down just to the boulder problem by myself and did it 10 times, or I think it was 8 times in a row, but like in an hour, you know, just like over and over. I mean, that's pretty solid, you know. Right. But actually, I was going to say for the pure climbing audience, like, so my mental tick list for free rider, I basically had a list of all the pitches, like starting from like pitch 2 off the ground, the little 11B roof. I was like, oh, that's always kind of weird. It has like this move that I don't really love. Right. That eventually I got over. And then the 2 free blast slabs were always like sort of sketchy. And then the slab move off the heart, there's like that 11C move.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Well, so I wound up going around that. Right. I found a really cool variation to go around it.
I heard that.
Which is like strictly a solo variation because there's no pro. So nobody would ever lead like 30 feet of 510 with no gear when you could like clip a bolt and do one move of 511.
The cat that you passed on the...
Oh yeah,
on the heart, and he posted a little short film of you starting up the up the crack. Oh, he told me that. He got in touch with me. He's like, dude, I got this. I was the dude. He was not the unicorn guy.
Yeah, the guy below. Yeah,
and I emailed him back. I'm like, did you watch him do that slab move up above there? Because it's heinous. And he's like, no, I think he went around it.
Yeah, I went around it. But so I found that variation. I was pretty stoked.
Okay, cool.
And then to the hollow flake, the traverse to the hollow flake, and then the down climb. I always found the down climb kind of hard. But actually, James Lucas gave me like some key beta to skip the part that I thought was hard.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he was like, why didn't you use the block? And I was like, what block? And then it turns out there was like this big jug block, like arms reach to the left that I just had never seen. I was like, how many times have I climbed this pitch without ever noticing there's this like jug over there? I was like, that's so weird. So there was always that pitch. And then basically like the monster was always like a bit of a question mark. Not so much that it's hard at all. No, I didn't do the underclimb.
Oh, you didn't?
I traversed in below the ear.
Oh, okay.
But the thing about the monster is that like it always kind of makes your joints hurt and stuff. Like it makes your whole body hurt when you finish. And so it's kind of a weird, like you just don't want to, like it blasts your core and your body, and then you just don't want to like lose body tension for the rest of the route, you know, because like obviously the crux is right above that, and you need to like still feel totally fresh. And the crux, I mean, is really all about body tension, like being able to push between your hands and feet. Anyway, so then the crux was kind of like big question mark. You're like, that's hard. And then above that, there were basically the 3 pitches, the 2 corner pitches and the traverse around the corner, which is like 11 plus, 12B, 12A without any real like rest between them. You know, so you're basically doing the 3 last kind of hard pitches.
Yeah, because it's all hanging belays that you're playing.
Yeah, exactly. Past. There's stances. Right. I mean, you can go no hands sort of if you try hard, but it's not like restful, you know. Well, no, it is restful. It's just not like a ledge.
Yeah, but you're not just kicking it.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's like pretty extreme, you know, because you're doing like the 3 crazy pitches at the top.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, so basically like those were all the sections of the wall that I was like, okay, this is all serious. And then, you know, over the 2 seasons that I worked on, I just like systematically like worked my way through all the pitches.
Right.
You know?
And kind of took them off the like, these are super.
Yeah. But like the free blast, I mean, I probably climbed the free blast like 10 or 15 times, which is like a lot. You know, I wrapped down it several times. A couple times I just went to the slabs and then we would just wrap down because I didn't really need to do the exit climbing. I mean, there's just so much, you know, so much beta.
Right, I know.
I wish I could like download it all into something, you know, because it's like I freaking spent so much time to like learn that wall, and now I like feel like I know it so well. I'm like, oh, I wish I could like deposit that somewhere.
Yeah, it'd be golden for a lot of people.
I know, yeah.
Just plug into Alex Honnold's beta someday. I got one more. What about the Scotty Burke off with? Like
Scotty Burke's like so casual.
Fuck you, man.
Yeah.
I thought that was so hard.
Yeah. Dude, when I soloed the
like
route,
getting into it and then like I guess if you climb off that anchor, it's almost probably harder, but I don't know, right there.
well, I don't do any of the lie back and getting in. I just off with the whole thing, and it's all really easy.
Okay.
But it's funny. So when I was sending, like when I was soloing Freerider, I was like in the Scotty Burke, like charging, you know, because after 4 hours of soloing, like you feel pretty good. Like I felt super warmed up and like smooth, and like it felt great, you know.
That's good to know.
And I was like smoking my way up the Scotty Burke, and I like had a thought halfway up that I was like, no one has ever climbed this pitch better than I'm climbing right now.
It's true.
And then I was like, humility, calm. You know, I was like, this is not the time to like, totally. I was like, this is not the time to like blow a foot and like fall off the top of the Freerider, because I'm like, I'm the man, as I'm like charging the Scotty Burke, you know. But no, I was like, wow, I just climbed the Scotty Burke in probably like 3 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, I could hear Jimmy jugging around the corner from me. He had like wrapped in on this line in between the Salta head wall and the Freerider. He was kind of like hanging in space because it was like a cool angle for something. But so he was trying to jug to the summit as fast as he could so that he could like be on top for my top out. And I kept making little bird whistles, you know, because I was around the corner from him and I could hear him, and I was like trying to let him know like where I was so that, you know, he could like go faster basically, because I was like going fast. And
so you were climbing it faster than he was jugging.
I mean, yeah, because he was kind of jugging like basically in free hanging space with like a, you know, like cameras and stuff. He had like weight out of it. I was like, oh, Jimmy's gonna die. But so we wound up meeting at the top of that pitch, and then he was like, give me a head start, and I'm like, I'll give you 10 seconds, and I'd count to like 6, and then start climbing again as fast as I could. But he basically made it to the top like roughly the same time I did.
Okay.
And yeah, it was fun. I mean, the last 500 feet of the Freerider, I was like, you know, it's like victory lap style. You're just charging to the summit because it all feels like
then you're
easy compared to
there.
Yeah.
But I mean, speaking of like humility, like, you know, did you have that feeling of like, whoa, this thing is gonna get done? Or you were just like,
no, it didn't matter then. I was raging.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I mean, you know, I was still like paying attention and trying hard and like holding on.
Clearly,
But no, I mean, so the thing is, I'd also soloed that before. I'd done the Easy Rider, like the little variation-y thing that Dean had done years ago. Have you heard of that?
No.
It was something Dean had soloed for this BBC documentary, The Man Who Can Fly. But he down climbed Lurking Fear, the top pitch, and then traversed Thanksgiving Ledge forever, and then joined Freerider at the round table and then soloed to the top.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was just kind of like one of Dean's creative things, and it makes for beautiful footage because like he's soloing the top of the Freerider.
Yeah, it's way
But
up
he didn't have to like climb the whole Freerider to get there,
Sure.
you know? But so I had done the Easy Rider earlier in the season as like sort of a way to wrap my head around, you know, like parts of El Cap. And so I'd already like technically sold the last 500 feet. I like knew the deal, and just, yeah, I mean, it was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you know, someday I'll maybe hopefully have a conversation with some of the folks that were filming you. Having talked to Mikey already and Shane, never talked to Jimmy, but did you have any conversations about like how they felt about filming you in terms of their stress level?
Yeah, I don't know.
About being up there with this guy that's like not attached to anything?
I mean, I think Shane was always like pretty highly stressed. Yeah. I don't think Shane likes soloing or like any of the extreme stuff. Shane's just such a gentle soul, you know? Yeah. But I mean, obviously they all held it together. Like I had no idea. Nobody was like outwardly projecting anything.
Yeah, maybe maybe even these conversations came afterwards, but.
Well, I mean, just Shane, you could just tell that he's not like super stoked on like, you know, he's not the one being like, hey, would you do that again so we can get the shot better? Or, you know, he's kind of like, okay, we got it. Let's call it good.
Let's move on.
You know?
We've just
Jimmy is much more willing to be like, oh, just hang on that jug for like a while longer. I'm going to get a different angle. I mean, when I was sending the Freerider, we didn't do any posing like that. But like in general, Jimmy's totally comfortable being like, yeah, just hang there. Let me switch lenses. You know, I'll switch batteries. Like, okay, yeah, you still good? Yeah, keep hanging for a minute. You know, like I don't know. But like the first ever soloing shoot I did with Mikey Schaefer, he was holding the lights for Jimmy, and like Jimmy was shooting, and Mikey was like lighting Separate Reality, and Mikey like fully was looking the other way with his like head down, just like holding the light where it was supposed to be, and like didn't watch any of the shoot.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, that's kind of always been my question, and I sort of get it, like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like watching soloing either. Like, I don't want to watch somebody else solo stuff because, you know, it's totally uncomfortable. You're like, man, like, does he look solid? I hope he looks solid. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
So I got to go cliche a little bit. We have to try anyway to see if we can get an answer here. So you top out. What's going on in your brain? I mean, you
I was
like
stoked out of my gourd.
Ultimate dream for you.
Yeah, ultimate dream. I was so stoked.
Yeah.
Even now I'm like smiling all big. I was so happy for like so long. I mean, there was a lot of hugging and like high fiving, and I just sort of like wandered in circles. And like Jimmy was shooting pictures, and the videographer Claire, who like had shot the base and the summit. He's like a documentary filmmaker. He was like just filming the whole thing, but I was basically just like wandering around on the top being like, yes, like so stoked. And we like killed some time. I kind of wanted more of the crew to like jug back up so I could like give hugs and proper like we could all celebrate a bit. Sam Crosley came up. I don't know if you know him, but he made like the Summerfest movies with me and Cedar. Okay. And actually he would be an interesting person to have on sometime, because he's like just graduated college, like film school type stuff. He's all young, but he's like really stoked on the scene, but he's the ultimate like fly on the wall for all this stuff. He's been Jimmy's photo assistant for this whole project with El Cap, but he's like the ultimate scrub, where he's like making dinner and cleaning up and like downloading photos and like dealing. But at the same time, he's like this young kid who's like deeply in the scene, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But like Sam's had like an interesting experience like that. He just like cold called Cedar to like intern, just to like show up and make Summerfest with him. Or no, he just was like, I want to work with Cedar. And Cedar and I were on Summerfest, and Cedar was like, it's a good time. Like, we actually need somebody to come shoot.
Sure.
And he just like showed up and shot with us for like a week, and it was like cool. Sweet, But anyway, so this guy Sam, but so like he came up, and so he's been a friend of mine for years, and it's cool for everybody to get to the top, so I could like give hugs, and I don't know, we were all pretty stoked.
Yeah. So then let me go post immediate. Like you said, you're still smiling, you're still like just jazzed from months ago. And I mean, again, like I have to sort of tread in the cliches, but just because I want to see what we can get, like, was there like a shift in you? Was there a change? Was it just another slightly bigger thing than you'd done before? I mean, do you feel anything like what we want you to feel, what we want you to like? We want you to be like, like have. I mean, going back to Honnold and what you said about his sort of spiritual, again, maybe not quite the right word to describe it, but philosophical or metaphysical look at it a little bit. Did you, because again, like we kind of want you to. We want you to like.
I will say
for
that
your spirit or whatever.
More than anything I've ever climbed, this is like something that I'm proud of, and that it, like thinking about now, I'm still like, that's so amazing. Like I'm so stoked. And I mean, it's the first thing I've ever climbed where like I feel totally comfortable going on to like late night TV and being like, that's right, I did do that, and I'm proud of that.
Okay,
because you're like, that's rad.
Yeah.
I mean, my whole life. I mean, basically my whole climbing life, I've like built up El Cap as like, that's like the pinnacle of climbing, like if anybody ever did that would be the raddest thing ever done. And like now that I've done it, I'm like, that's kind of douchey, and I don't, I'm not going to like claim anything like that, but I have always thought of it as like, that is the pinnacle of climbing. And I'm just like, I'm pretty stoked,
Yeah, well,
like it's like, I mean, it's everything I ever wanted, like that's awesome.
I mean, it's not douchey because it's true. I mean, if you're in 20 years, if you're just like sitting at a bar, like proclaiming your greatness about,
that's douchey. Yeah.
That'll be douchey. But in the moment, you're like, it really, I mean.
Yeah, well, I would never make any claims that this is any harder, better than like whatever, like climbing Everest without oxygen, like Reinhold Messner stuff, or like, because it's just such different things and it's pretty esoteric. But I'll just say that I personally have always put it on a pedestal as like, that's the thing I care most about. And so to like actually do that, I'm just like, that's, as satisfying as I can imagine.
So do you ever expect any sort of letdown?
No, I mean, I don't know. Should I?
Yeah, no.
Am I getting all depressed?
No,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like one of those things that I'm willing to bet that my whole life it's something that I'll be able to think about and be like, that's right. Like, well, because I put a lot of work into it too, and like it took a long time to like even believe that it was possible, and then to actually do it, and the fact that it all actually worked out well, and that my experience was like everything I wanted. The climbing felt amazing. I felt totally prepared. I wasn't gripped at all. I wasn't like fighting to the death and like overcoming. I was just like went up there and I cruised up the route and I felt great. And like the fact that we made a good film about it, which I haven't actually seen, but I'm going to assume is going to be really good. And there's like everything about it like worked out well. I'm just like, man. It's like so sweet.
Right.
It's like can't even believe it all.
Well, that's good. And I'm not like trying to steer you into some sort of dark place, but oftentimes when I talk to people about on the show even, there's plenty of episodes where they're, you know, and you've probably felt it with other things.
Yeah, big goals where like when you finish it,
you're
that
like,
like dark.
Now what? Like, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
but it sounds like you're still.
Well, so part of the thing with El Cap was that even from the beginning, I always tried to like look past El Cap because I never wanted to build it up as like. So the weird thing about soloing is that it's all psychological anyway. So like you don't really want to like build it up too big, you know, because I'm like, look, it's just a 30 pitch 12D, you know, like, and I mean, I've had like a lot of soloing days in my life that are like similar to that in some regard or another, you know, like I've never quite done something exactly like that. But, you know, if I just look at it as like, oh, I had to go solo 30 pitches at the Crag, like up to 12D, I'm like, that's not necessarily, you know, like a cutting edge day of soloing for me. And so, you know, I was like, oh, I should try to keep it in perspective. Like, even though El Cap is like the most important thing to me, it's like still, you know, beyond that, I want to like climb harder sport routes and I want to like go certain places and go on trips and like, you know, do other things with life. And so I was always like sort of consciously looking past El Cap so that it wasn't just like, I just have to solo El Cap. And I feel like that's when you have the big come down, is when you like put it all in, put all your eggs in one basket, right. And then you like do it and you're like, huh, like now what, you know?
Well, it sounds like you, more than even just getting ready for the climb, you've again, like part of the process is probably moving to that level of understanding of what you're about to do. Because I think, like you just said, if you'd have built it up so much as this is the ultimate thing, this is my dream, this is, I mean, that kind of stuff probably could get you wiped out on the climb as well. Like, oh, here I am, totally, I'm doing it. You know,
yeah,
like,
and I mean, you see that all the time at the Sport Crag when somebody's about to send their sport proj and then they totally punt at the anchors because they're like, I was just too pumped.
Right.
And you're like, dude, you're on like 5-10 jugs at the anchors. Like, you were not too pumped. You just like choked.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like the way to not choke like that is to not like build it up too big, not to be all over gripped, you know? I want to just be like, I'm just going climbing and just do it.
Nice.
Yeah. But thankfully I didn't choke it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the last like 511 splitter hand crack at the very top? You're like, I'm so pumped.
Oh, Jesus. No, I can't. And please, like, well, like part of this whole thing, you said that the community really got around what you were doing and understood. Yeah, we also need to like chill out about it.
It seemed like it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's just me.
The thing is, Alex, is like I think the climbing community as a whole really wants you to succeed. And obviously we want you to succeed because we don't want you to die. But we also want you to succeed in that we want your goals to be achieved. And like I said, you've become, for better or worse, for like your chagrin or not, like, you know, you're this thing in climbing that everybody wants a little bit of. In the sense, and I think like in a way it's all very positive. We want you to succeed. You're like our guy, and I don't know if that like bugs you or not, but it's totally the truth.
I don't know if I didn't even know if that was true. You know, I'm like, huh, really?
No, for sure. And I mean, obviously, like I asked you about the filming thing, and I'm sure there's some thread somewhere that's talking about what bullshit it was that you got filmed up there or whatever.
Yeah, I'm like,
but
whatever.
In general, because you can't please everybody, I feel like I said, I felt like when people were talking about it the weekend after, it was weird. It was like total joy. And everybody was just like, whoa. And it wasn't like, whoa, that motherfucker's crazy. It was like,
no, I was kind of, I was moved by that too, actually. I mean, I saw a lot of the commentary and stuff and I was like, yeah, overwhelmingly positive and supportive. And it did feel like kind of the whole community was like celebrating a moment, you know, and I was like, oh, that's like so touching.
No, it totally was.
It's kind of similar to the Dawn Wall or something though, you know, where it feels like the whole community can like help somebody celebrate like their dream, you know? Like, it's kind of awesome.
Well, the thing about the Dawn Wall though too is that the media, the outside media was all there during, and I think like feel like, and we'll move to that in just a second, but a lot of times you're ours, like, and so when the outside media and Jimmy Kimmel wants to talk to you, we're just like, whatever, like he's still our guy, you know, and I think because it was such this like thing that was thrown on our plates immediately, and we didn't have any idea, although everybody was like, someday,
maybe someday,
it was, it just felt like everybody was like, you know, it was cool. I mean, it was like, it sounds as cheesy.
I mean, it's crazy that it all worked out that way. Yeah, you know what I mean? That it all like, that's why, I mean, it's great for me that the whole experience was like so positive.
Yeah, totally. So let's finish up here pretty soon, but with the fame, because you have this like kind of like happy-go-lucky attitude about the fact that, oh, Jimmy Kimmel wants to talk to me, or, because I think you also know or feel like, well, it's just this thing that's happening to me right now, and I'll go back to my van, and it'll all
I did go back to my van.
Yeah,
totally.
literally.
Totally.
But you've talked in the past, and you've talked to me about wanting. You're in a position where a climber can use some of this to like do some other stuff. So let's talk about that to finish up the foundation, and like I said, maybe rolling this little bit of fame, because it, like you said, when you went on Kimmel, they probably needed you because someone really famous bailed.
Yeah, totally.
So in the big world, it's a modicum of fame, but for climbing, it seems like a big deal. So what does that mean to you to be able to sort of change this into something that's positive for you and doesn't change you in a negative way?
Well, there are kind of two parts to that. I mean, I feel like it's a good segue to talk about like my foundation and like the humanitarian types of stuff that I'd like to do in life. But basically, I mean, I feel like, I've been given this opportunity in life. I should do something like good for the world, do something positive. And like, I've been trying to do that through my foundation and supporting, development projects and stuff in different parts of the world. But I feel like someday we ought to do a full podcast just talking about like, off-grid solar projects and like development, and like, because I actually find that stuff sort of more interesting in a lot of ways. Well, just because it's so much more important for the world.
Can you be a little more specific real quickly here about what you just mentioned?
A lot of different things, yeah.
Yeah, like what is it? You have this foundation. What's it called exactly?
So I have the Honnold Foundation,
okay,
which is sort of douchey, but is whatever. It's just how it is.
Well, no,
for the most part, the foundation though has just been me giving like roughly a third of my income, or maybe a quarter now, but giving like a significant portion of my income to various environmental nonprofits.
Okay.
And so, obviously we accept donations from anybody who's interested, but for the most part, it's just been me like funneling money to projects that I think are important. And when I started the foundation, I was just kind of looking to like do something positive in the world, totally vague. And then as I started looking into the space and seeing who was doing what kind of work and how that all, what they're actually doing, I found that I was sort of gravitating towards like development type projects with energy access. So basically like environmental projects that improve standard of living or that like lift people out of poverty. And so that basically means like solar projects in the developing world. Because that's like, it's getting people off of burning kerosene. So it's like reducing carbon emissions, good for climate. But more importantly, it's it's a huge health hazard for people to be burning kerosene in confined space. When you think of like the 1.2 billion people on Earth that live without access to electricity, they're living in like huts, and then they're like lighting their hut with a kerosene lantern, or the candles, or like wood burning, whatever. I mean, there are a lot of ways to like burn things, but that's all terrible for human health compared to like an LED light bulb.
Right.
And so, I mean, yeah, basically it's like that double whammy of reducing, burning, but then also, helping people's health, like allowing people to study at night. It's also, people save a ton of money. Like in parts of Eastern Africa, people spend up to a third of their income buying kerosene, which like, can you imagine spending a third of your income to light your home?
Right.
And also like, and all these people all live in like the equatorial regions of Earth. And I mean, it's easy to forget because we live in the Northern Hemisphere where there are like seasons, but in the equator, it's 12 hours of dark every day. Like, so all year round, it's always 12 hours of dark. And you can only sleep like 8 of them. So it basically means you're just losing 4 hours of every day because there's no light and you can't do anything. Which, I mean, can you imagine if you were just like, oh, every day I just like kill 4 hours doing nothing because I just can't turn on a light? Or like,
well, yeah.
What?
I think we it's like the opposite here. Like, we kill it just because we're lazy.
We're looking at screens.
Yeah, we're looking at screens.
There's so many lights, you're just like dazed in the lights.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, it's just that certainly for me growing up in suburban California, it never would have occurred to me that, there are like hundreds of millions of children in the world that like can't do schoolwork because they physically can't see their papers,
Right.
like can't read their book because there's no light. And you're like, that's pretty basic level. I mean, to me, that's sort of like entry-level development type stuff. I feel like once people have access to energy, it's like the beginning of a path to like help them, lead a more prosperous life. But
you're still climbing a lot. You're still kind of living that dream. Do you see yourself as becoming more and more involved in those things from an administratively point of view?
I mean, I'd like to hope that, over the next 20 years, I spend more and more time working through the foundation. And just because the work in some ways is so much more gratifying, like you're actually doing something positive in the world. I mean, I love climbing and like that's, what I care about most. But at the same time, when it's all said and done, like when I have a great climbing experience, like I had a good experience and like that's it. But like, you know, doing work through the foundation, you're like, oh, an entire village now has light, or, you know, at whatever kind of scale, you're like, other people's lives have been positively impacted through my work, you know, and like that's cool.
So how do you feel about like beating the pavement on fundraising and things like that?
Well, so that's kind of the whole thing, and that's why I've like hardly talked about the foundation much. It's like not much of a thing because it's like mildly embarrassing, and like just you know,
why? Because it's called the Honnold Foundation.
No, but just in general, like you just don't want to be all preachy about it.
Sure.
And like it's weird for me because I'm like, oh, I'm like trying to do something good in the world, but then you know it's easy to criticize too because it's like, oh, well, you're flying all over. Like if you're worried about carbon emissions, like what's the deal with your flying?
Right.
But I mean, though, to be fair, I have actually done some math on that stuff, and I'm pretty sure that I'm still like positive in terms of. I mean, basically because like, you know, solar systems offset a certain amount of carbon too. And so I'm kind of like, I'm pretty sure I'm still, but then, you know, basically I'm like, well, at least I'm trying, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to do something positive, but I don't know. It's just like, it's weird to put it out there because then you're like, it's so easy to get attacked for it too, you know?
Yeah, but
especially in the U.S. where people are like, "Oh, like climate change, that's not even a thing," and you're just like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, well,
but I get it. Like, but you know, it's like I said about even soloing El Cap. Like 99.9% of us were hooray, but there's always going to be the
and in general, I don't really care about the criticism, you know.
Right.
But actually, it's funny that I'm more sensitive to that sort of stuff about the foundation than I am about my climbing. Because my climbing, I'm 100% confident. It's like if somebody wants to criticize, I'm like, that's fine. Like, who cares, you know? And I think I'm more sensitive about the foundation stuff, maybe because it matters more in a way, or maybe because I'm slightly less, I just like know a little bit less about it. And so, you know, like I'm doing my best and I'm trying to do something positive, but like, honestly, you know, like I'm not an expert on, you know, like off-grid solar in Africa or like development in general. And like, I'm certainly not an expert in like, you know, the finances and stuff involved with like how to lift the bottom billion out of poverty and things like that. I just read a book like by Jeffrey Sachs about ending poverty, and it's like all this stuff with like UN agencies and, you know, like debt cancellation in the third world. And I'm just like, you know, I mean, I don't know, I've read some of that stuff, but you're like, man, it's pretty complex. And
well,
like,
it's
I definitely
super
don't
complex.
totally
and there's
get
a lot of pitfalls, you know, with nonprofit work and where the money goes.
Yeah, totally.
You know, you trust one person and it's out of your hand.
Yeah.
Like climbing's in your hand.
Yeah.
You know, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, but I mean, the nonprofit stuff isn't totally out of your hands. I mean, you can vet all the different people you're working with. You can like make sure the projects are happening the way you see. It's all, you know.
Yeah, but
in theory,
I'm saying,
it's all still working well, but it's just
everybody who does that work knows that there is a point, especially when you are putting money into these countries, that
there's a lot of trust involved.
And there's a lot of government issues there, like who's, you know, that sort of like goes out of your hand.
And it's like a bit of a, you know, you can be like making progress in certain projects. You're like, oh, you know, I'm helping these people. But then at the same time, it's such a huge problem that you're kind of like, well, yeah, it's like kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, oh, is it even worth helping, you know, 50 people if they're like another 500 million that are suffering? But, you know, the reality, I was like, no, of course it's worth helping those 50 people, because like one of those kids that like can now read, you know, might grow up to be like an astronaut or something.
Sure.
I mean, that's what I always think about whenever I'm in Africa, is like you drive through these villages and it's like huts with like tons of kids, and you're like, any one of those kids could be like a pilot if they had a real education, you know, or like, they could be scientists, they could be like doctors, they could, you know, they have the exact same potential that I had when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. But like I got a really great public school education in California and like wound up having all this opportunity. And then I look at them and I'm just like, oh, you know, like how unfair is it that they don't have that opportunity? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, there's like this basic sense of fairness that you're just like, you know, just because I happen to be born in California, like, does that really mean that my life should be like that much easier and like that much more fun than somebody else's life who just happened to be born in, you know, like rural Kenya? Like, mm-hmm. I mean, that sucks. Like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
You know? But
well, it's good that you have these feelings. I mean, you know, it is interesting for, you know, someone like you said with the privilege that you had to traipse through these countries on an adventure, you know, like going to Angola. You know, I talked to Stacy about you guys going to Angola and like traipse through these countries as these climbers with all this sweet gear and all these like no worries, and be viewed by them. So even or looking around you and trying to understand the empathy of what their life is like, because I think it can be rare in adventure, whether it's kayaking or any of these extreme sports, to go and come home and maybe have some thoughts about, well, those guys are really poor, and then
move on to the next thing.
Well, I think the reason that people move on to the next thing is because it's such a big issue. You don't even really know how to start. Yeah, it's overwhelming. And so then, you don't really know what you could do. And so you just kind of like let it be. Like, well, I can't affect that. And so, I mean, through my foundation, I'm like trying to affect it at a time. And it's like a teensy little scratch. And it's like kind of embarrassing because you look at like the Gates Foundation or something and they're like, oh, we're investing $50 billion into like development projects. Like we're hoping to cure malaria,
Right.
And I'm like, oh, at the Honnold Foundation, we're hoping to put a couple solar panels on that hut.
Right. Well,
you're like, we're not curing malaria.
Right.
But at the same time, you're like, well, hopefully some of those kids get to learn how to read and like they wind up having a better life, And so you're like, well, if that's still positively impacting even a few people, then like that's better than doing nothing, But I don't know. We'll see. But so I'm kind of hoping to do more with the foundation, like as I move forward,
Cool.
But
I mean, like I said, these opportunities, they can be turned into opportunities for your foundation,
Well, that's kind of the thing. I'm kind of hoping over the next year to sort of like ramp up foundation stuff a bit and like be a little more public about it, so that when this crazy movie comes out next year, it's all sort of like better in place,
ready to go.
But
yeah. So,
and actually, as it is, when I started the foundation, I felt like it was a little too early for me. I was kind of like, I'm still primarily focused on climbing. Climbing is my thing. But I kind of knew that like in my life, I wanted to be able to work, on the sorts of projects that I'm supporting through the foundation. And so, I was kind of like, well, this might be 5 years early, but I may as well like get it started so that in 5 years I have a better sense of how it all works and I've like learned a bunch. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, technically I've had the foundation 4 or 5 years now, I guess. But I'm sort of just starting to want to be slightly more public about it and like feel more comfortable.
Well, that's a way to work around that overwhelmed problem.
Yeah, I suppose.
Where you're not just like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to fix it all. So
yeah, you sort of ease into it and just like let it grow.
All right, so climbing-wise, I've heard you mention like, okay, I've got these other goals, climbing harder, climbing 9A has been the thing that I keep hearing about.
Yeah, it's an easy one, yeah.
So is that kind of like, because the other question is that people have been sort of mumbling about or asking, in these conversations that you don't know about. But, okay, so what is soloing done for him? How do you do anything more? Because at least what we hear about, there has been this progression where every once in a while you do something and we hear about it and it was like a little more rad. But obviously,
at some point it doesn't get more rad.
Yeah, it doesn't get more rad. And then, again, like, and this is really weird, and you must know that it goes on, but everybody speculates, like, God, I hope he doesn't fall someday,
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah, well, I hope I don't fall too.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, and a lot of people, again, we're generally like really positive and want you to succeed. Yeah. And therefore, people are like, well, God, I hope he just fucking stops one day because
the thing is though, I do love soloing though, and I'm sure I'll be soloing forever. But like, I don't know if I'll ever necessarily solo anything bigger than 3,000 feet of 12D.
Where can you get that anyway?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's Golden Gate. No.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have like thought of that stuff. You're kind of like, oh, should I try for something harder? Because the actual experience like was amazing and like felt great, and so you're like, maybe I should try something harder. Like maybe that's the thing. But I'm like, I don't know. I'll always solo stuff like the Nutcracker, like the best 5/8 in the valley. Like, I do that in my tennies all the time, and I'm like, it's so fun, it's so glorious. You're like, what a nice route. Like, I'll do that my whole life. But beyond that, I'm like, I don't know.
Okay,
maybe.
But in the immediate future, is this sport climbing ideal or this hard climbing ideal in the immediate future? Like, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, the immediate future for me, like, so the whole process of soloing El Cap and like making the film and everything, I've basically done like no work or no appearances or sponsor stuff for like over a year. So the immediate future, I need to like do a little work basically. Right. Like I've been putting too much stuff on the back burner and I need to like actually get some things done. So I'm like doing a bunch of events, doing a lot of travel stuff, and like, but in a way that lends itself to hard climbing more because it means more rest and like less volume. Mm-hmm. So like, I can like try really hard for a day or two and then like do a couple days of work stuff and like train in the gym or like hangboard. It all like works more. So I don't know, we'll see. Basically, like, I mean, I would be totally happy if I just climbed casually, like with my girlfriend, having fun, doing whatever for the next year, and like don't even think about goals and stuff.
Great, yeah. Like, I mean, that has to be stressful to just have this goal on your mind, even if it did happen.
Well, and it's also just relaxing to have like finished a goal. Yeah. You're like, sweet, like I'm just gonna go have fun climbing.
Well, what you should do.
a little piece of advice: have a baby.
Oh my gosh, I'm definitely not having a baby yet. But actually,
that really fits well into the training, sport climbing lifestyle. No big deal.
I mean, thinking about the whole culmination of your career type of stuff. I mean, thinking about it with Lynn Hill. I mean, she's been climbing, she's still, you see her in the gym climbing 513, super casually, and you're like, wow, she's an amazing climber. But from any kind of outside perspective, when she freed the nose in a day, that's probably the pinnacle of her career. Mm-hmm. But since then, she's still been climbing full time for the next 20 years. She's climbed V12 in Waco. She climbed hard sport routes. She's gone on trips. She does all kinds of stuff, and she obviously still gets a lot out of it, and that's great. I'd be totally happy if that's me. You know what I mean?
Right on.
If climbing the free rider is the one thing I ever do, and then beyond that, I just I'll still be climbing. Hopefully, still be an okay climber. But I mean, hopefully I'll do better things, and hopefully it'll be harder. But if I don't, I'm that's fine. I don't know. I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, you should be pretty proud of it.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, awesome. Thanks a lot for sitting down and giving me a little bit of time in this crazy moment in your life. In terms of people wanting a piece of you, it's kind of a big deal right now.
It's the EnormaCast, that's a big deal.
Right on, Alex. Well, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Nice.
But what is best in life? The open steppe, fleet horse, falcons at your wrist, the wind in your hair. Wrong! Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good. That is good.